Hi everyone, and welcome to the second Pest Control Officer webinar of 2022. My name is Betty Johnson, the Plant Health Officer for SAM Division 3. I'll be the moderator for this webinar. A few housekeeping rules for this webinar before we get started. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, please type them into the question box. We will have the question and answer section after the end of the presentation. This webinar is eligible for continuing education credits for pesticide applicators. If there is more than one person watching from the same computer that wants continuing education credit for this webinar, please let me know. My contact information is located within the chat box and on the SAM website. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted on the SAM website within the next couple of weeks. Before we begin, I have one more piece of information to share with you. All online orders for the PCO supplies received after February 15 and through March will be held for mailing out until after April 1st. If there are any questions regarding this, please contact SARM. Today's presentation is about feral pigs in Saskatchewan and will be presented by Dr. James Tansey, Provincial Insect Pest Management Specialist, Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. On that note, let's get started. Welcome, James. Take it away.
Thanks, Betty. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you for the invitation to talk to you about feral pigs. Obviously a subject that's, we'll say, well entrenched in the news, especially lately, so hopefully provide a little bit of clarity on it. And if I can get my slides to advance. Okay, so when we're talking about feral pigs, we are talking about Sus scrofa. When we're talking about domestic pigs, we are talking about Sus scrofa. They are the same species. There are obviously some physical differences associated with the two groups, and I'll talk about those, but functionally they are the same critter. They are indigenous to northeastern Europe and Africa, and you'll hear some sometimes referred to as Eurasian wild boar. Conditionally correct. Yeah, they are native to that region, Central Europe, North Africa as well. They were originally brought by Spanish explorers to North America as livestock in the 1500s, and that population has spread in the United States to what is considered now to be a pretty gross underestimate of 6 million pigs. There's some current accounts of that many pigs being in Florida alone. So Florida and Texas are the two major hotspots with large populations scattered throughout the southeast United States. Canadian populations are associated with agricultural diversification efforts in the 80s and 90s, and that was the establishment of meat and captive hunts of Eurasian wild boar stock. These animals were occasionally deliberately released and or escaped, and populations established from these releases. We have some varying estimates of Canadian populations, and we can talk about that in a little bit more detail in an upcoming slide. So they are considered amongst the most significant invasive species in the world, and although there has been some hyperbole associated with their potential effect, I don't think it could be understated. These are potentially very problematic animals. So as I mentioned before, they're functionally the same critter, wild boar and domestic pigs, and they will happily exchange genetic material and produce viable young. So there is some discussion about an increase in vigor associated with the mixing. Some of this may be true, some of it not necessarily. Particularly the increases in production of young or increases in fecundity. So the study that's often cited indicates an increase in litter size, and by that article's own account, it was a numeric increase, not a statistical increase. So that's why we do stats. So there may be something to the benefit of crossing, but it's we'll say tenuous. In Western Canada, interbred animals are now considered prevalent. So that is mixes of escaped domestic pigs and the original Eurasian wild boar that were introduced in the 80s and 90s. Because of this mixing, rather than calling them wild boar, the current movement amongst working groups, both nationally and internationally, is to adopt the term feral pig and invasive wild pig. So recent strategies or draft strategies are being worked on by different jurisdictions nationally, Ontario has released their draft strategy, and we're working on a draft strategy currently in Saskatchewan that's working its way through approvals. We have chosen feral pig. Ontario has landed on invasive wild pig, but we indicate in the text that really these should be equivalent terms. So as I mentioned before, much of the existing guidance is talking about wild boar. I think these, for the most part, should be considered feral pigs in most contexts. So looking at phenotypic differences or physical differences between the lineages, so the top photos here, you can see relatively shorter back, elongated snout, obvious tusks, which you can see in domestic swine as well, but you can see how the back is rounder in the Berkshire pig on the lower left, and a little less lean looking, we'll say. The hybrids, or loose term of the term hybrid, the mixed stock can be a rainbow of different colors. So yeah, if you can think of potential animal patterns for hair coloration in mammals, you're going to see it in these mixes. So a broad array with the mixed populations. They can grow to very large sizes. So this is a photo from, I think I want to say Oklahoma. This was something that was pulled off of an NBC News site. I think this pig was estimated at nearly 1,000 pounds. So very large animal. Its large size was attributed to its living near a fish farm. So it was happily munching on as much high protein fish meal as fish diet as it could get into its mouth, and that was the result of it. The other photo here is from Hong Kong, and so of course urban populations can be problematic as well. So another large animal. Sometimes they're referred to as pigzilla or hogzilla. So go hogzilla for your Blue Oyster Cult fans in the audience. So we have pigs, and pigs are prevalent in some different jurisdictions. So really, what's the problem? Some consider these to be naturalized components of the ecosystem. Wherever they land, I enthusiastically am opposed to this view, and I'll indicate why. They're very damaging. Their direct damage to landscapes can be associated with their wallowing, digging, and rooting. They can cause a lot of damage to wetlands, and I have some photos coming up of some of the damage that they can do to crops. They are broadly omnivorous, so if it is alive or was at one point or another, they will put it in their mouths and they can use it as food. They will demonstrate local preference for food that they become used to, but overall, most things are on the menu. They can cause significant damage to crops, range, and pasture, and can have predatory interactions with young livestock. They can harass and actually consume young livestock, and can be a real problematic for livestock producers. And all of these factors influence effects on agricultural production. Lastly, they can, or with this slide at any rate, their mechanical disturbance of landscapes picks up propagules from invasive plant species. They move it around, and they can actually introduce invasive plants, weeds to different portions of the landscapes, and sometimes dramatically change plant communities. So a photo from the USDA here of a wild pig, feral pig, munching away in a crop. They have a real predilection for corn, and can oftentimes be found in there, I think, both for cover and for dietary preference. This was a photo I took near St. Brew, where they've been digging up a winter cereal field, and finally a photo of a hog making off with a fawn. So once again, a lot of things are on the menu. Disease is arguably one of the biggest problems with these animals. We do conduct a disease survey in the ministry, or the livestock branch does, and coordinates with the University of Saskatchewan on this one. In 2020, Actinobacillus was detected, as was Toxoplasma, porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome viruses, influenza A, transmissible gastroenteritis virus, and porcine circovirus. These have potential significant impacts for domestic pork production. In addition, pseudorabies, which actually isn't a rabies virus at all, it's actually a herpes virus, but can lead to the mortality of predator populations, and sometimes in large numbers, as well as brucellosis, tuberculosis, and several other diseases that are important to livestock and humans, have been detected in sometimes large parts of their North American range. Happily, we haven't detected pseudorabies in Canada to this point, but I fear it might just be a matter of time. So it's important. Feral pigs are attracted to each other, and the feral animals will be attracted to domestic pork production, and this can facilitate disease transmission if you get close contact. The most important disease of commercial pork production and of wild pig populations in the world is African swine fever. It's called African swine fever because it was first detected in Kenya in 1907. Usually fatal to pigs. It's a hemorrhagic fever, and you can see the top right here. Pretty typical symptoms of this reddening and primarily of the ears is where it becomes first apparent. Transmitted through direct and indirect contact with infected pigs, feces, and bodily fluid. There is an arthropod vector associated with it, and it's soft-bodied ticks in the genus Ornithodoros. Pardon me, I'm tripping over that one. Happily, we don't have this tick in Canada. There has been some speculation that Stomoxys calcitrans, or the biting stable fly, pictured lower right, could be attributed with mechanical damage or mechanical transmission. That is somewhat controversial. So for those of you who have horses or have been near horses, you feel a sharp bite on, they seem to like your calves, and if you look down, you see a housefly, or what you think is a housefly, munching away on you. That's what you have there. That's Stomoxys calcitrans. They are all over North America. They are cosmopolitan. Honestly, they're worldwide. The African swine fever does not infect humans, but it can be mechanically transmitted by humans, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. The virus is relatively long-lived in pork and processed pork products, and pictured here is what was seized from a suitcase from Pearson International Airport. People like a taste of home, and they don't seem to have much in the way of restraint about moving some of this material around. So thank goodness for border services. So to control African swine fever, once established, biosecurity and culling are the only methods to contain. So biosecurity, that is excluding the virus, and culling once it does become established. It's now in 36 countries. That should actually be updated to 39. It is now in Italy and Dominican Republic and Haiti, including in the Western Hemisphere, as I indicated with my previous statement. Potentially very problematic for the pork industry. So 40% of China's sow herd was culled in 2019. So that is 200 million pigs. South Korea culled about 1 million. Vietnam also had a cull in the tens of millions. So it is a major problem. ASF is a reportable disease under the Health of Animals Act, and so all suspected cases must be reported to the CFIA. It is a potentially serious trade issue, and could result in moratoriums from important trade partners for Canadian pork. And of course, Canadian pork is a major industry in Canada. A distribution map of ASF worldwide. This is relatively recent, or end of last year. You can see that there's a little blip on Haiti and Dominican Republic, and I'll talk about that in a little bit of detail. So you can see the red indicates where it's present, yellow where it's suspected. So it is widely distributed. A significant concern in Central Europe, and I apologize, this map is actually from last year, and cases have increased. This is Germany on the left and Poland on the right, and these are wild boar in both in Germany and Poland that have been detected with African swine fever, so very problematic. And you can see also domestic pork production in Poland. And as I mentioned before, the first case documented in January of this year in Piedmont, Italy. The Italians obviously are not very happy with this. One of the problems with Central Europe is the animal is native here, there, pardon me, and it's actually quite culturally important historically, and you know, has mythological stories, myths, legends, etc. So culturally important, and they've met some resistance, some considerable resistance to controlling their wild boar population in Central Europe to try to bring this disease under control. I hope this video will play. This is a video that was forwarded to me from a colleague in Manitoba wondering where this was. There was speculation that it was Saskatchewan, and if you look at the equipment, it's more than likely Germany. So they have some pigs. So yeah, if you do stumble across this video, the context I saw it in was Western Canadian problem based on the equipment. I think that's not the case, and this has been misrepresented if that's how it's being presented. If you see it, oh, pardon me. Okay, should be on the next slide now. I mentioned before ASF has been detected in the Western Hemisphere. So in 2021, USDA APHIS detected an outbreak in Haiti near the border with Dominican Republic. There were reported outbreaks in Dominican Republic and ongoing outbreaks in Dominican Republic. It has since spread to Haiti, which is obviously potentially problematic, and for a couple of reasons, and I'll give an indication of those in an upcoming slide. So work that's going on by several countries to contain what's happening in Haiti, including the United States. They're working with Haitian authorities to determine the scope of the problem. They've created a protection zone around Puerto Rico, which of course is a relatively short distance across the water, and the U.S. Virgin Islands to help keep the disease from spreading to those locations. Movement to the United States mainland from those, because they are territories, would be relatively quick, I would think. So they mobilized additional staff to Puerto Rico and to support their response there. They're looking at large-scale eradication program for feral swine in Puerto Rico and inspection of 100% of the baggage. I indicated that people do like a taste from home, and it's not unusual for border services to pick up food that's being illegally transported and carry on and check baggage. Colombia and Mexico are also keenly interested in this, and there are other countries involved. From Colombia's perspective, they're increasing inspections of cargo flights, courier services, and cargo and passenger vehicles from Dominican Republic and Haiti, just to ensure no pork products are being introduced, and they will seize those pork products if they're detected, and increasing frequency of vehicle and pedestrian inspections. So I mentioned this is a picture from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. For those of you, and from Santo Domingo, from Dominican Republic. So for those of you who visit the Caribbean, livestock moving piggly wiggly around cities is not uncommon. It really is common practice there, and of course these find their way into natural and wild areas, and can become very difficult to control. And of course, these are culturally entrenched in this part of the world, so that adds another layer of complication. And I stumbled upon this when I was putting this presentation together. Again, Antigua, very close to Dominican Republic with established population, with established ASF. This strikes me as an odd thing to do, but this was being forwarded by some tourist sites. Takes all kinds, I guess. So our current understanding of populations in Saskatchewan, there are some projections of large population increases. I don't know that we're seeing that. We need to know, so because of that, we need to know the current extent of populations, and this will help us to inform management decisions and interact with our trade partners to address potential trade issues. So to that, SEIC is managing the feral wild boar control program in Saskatchewan, and this includes trapping, culling, Judas pigs, which I realize is kind of a funny term, but this is a radio collared pig that will be tracked, or GPS collared pig that will be tracked to locate other pigs, and UAV with hyperspectral cameras is also being employed. So to date, more than 500 pigs have been removed in 5 years. And that needs to be updated significantly. This year alone in the St. Brew area, more than 130 pigs have been removed since August. So that doesn't include the roughly 90 that were removed last year. The trapping crew there is really terrific. They really put their heads down and get to it, and have been very effective. And by their account, they're actually eliminating some local populations, so they're no longer trapping pigs in some regions where they have traditionally, and by their estimate, they're having a significant impact on those populations. So in 10 years, 25 crop insurance claims from wildlife damage, listing wild boar as primary contributor, totaling 100,000. So it may sound like a lot, but that's 10 years, and 100,000 when it comes to these sorts of claims isn't a lot, really. It does suggest low numbers. What this doesn't account for, though, is feeding in bins, which wouldn't necessarily be a direct crop damage and not necessarily claimable, and can be a problem. But these figures do suggest low numbers. So in addition to this, we have a provincial working group that has been tasked with one facet of the working group efforts is to do monitoring of the populations to determine exactly how widespread and dense the populations are. So we've got Ministry of Agriculture, so myself from Crops and Irrigation Branch. We also have representation from livestock. Crop insurance is an active member of this working group. Ministry of Environment is, as well as is Saskport, Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, the Trappers Association, and SARM. So thank you to everyone who contributes to this provincial working group. As I mentioned before, one of our major efforts is associated with monitoring, and that's ongoing this winter. We've done a switch from fall monitoring to winter monitoring. The snow tends to limit the movement of pigs to fairly distinct trails and makes them more detectable. So we're concentrating our efforts in the winter. Means we're having more challenges than we might in the late summer, fall, but I think the results will be more representative of the population. So we have a number of different monitoring sites. We've got 20 commercial sites in the province that include primarily wild meat production, but there's also one active hunt site, and we're concentrating efforts on there, as well as near commercial domestic pig production. Hog barns, as I mentioned before, the feral animals will be attracted to the domestic animals. So we're keeping an eye on these areas and in areas with past reports or current reports. If we get a report through our reporting system, we'll act on that, and either SEIC will send out an adjuster to investigate, or someone from the ministry will go out and investigate and deploy the baited camera stations. So what you can see here is deep in the grass is a hog feeder loaded with 100 pounds of corn. And let me tell you, that's a lot of fun to get back in the truck with if it hasn't been touched. It's staked to the ground so the hogs don't knock it over, and equipped with a game camera. We also set up game cameras in the area around this, so as to capture any activity of animals that are attracted to the hog feeder. These are set up for a week so as to acclimate the animals to them, and then we'll monitor for at least another week. The period is actually extended to about at least 10 days to 2 weeks, just to get a good look at things, and this can result in, holy cats, tens of thousands of photos that need to be processed. So thank you to our summer student Brett for experiencing the googly eyes of going through that many photos looking for pigs. So we also have, we've reached out to some of our working group collaborators to develop a network of camera collaborators. And these include the SEI trappers, who have been excellent at providing footage of feral pigs where they do occur. And as I mentioned before, it's, or I may not have mentioned, but primarily in the St. Preux area is where we're seeing pig activity and seeing an effect of the trapping as well. So you're going to get a lot of bycatch, or that is, you're going to snap a lot of clickies of animals that happen to stumble by your game cameras, as I'm sure anybody with game cameras has experienced. The one on the lower right was a lesson to me to always bring snowshoes. That snow was about 4 feet deep, and retrieving that camera was not so much fun. Bears are curious animals. This was near Moose Mountain, and this is a picture of a bear slobbering all over the lens and then making his way away, so influencing the image quality, we'll say. But we do get pictures of pigs as well. So these are from Alan Goulet up in the St. Preux area, one of the SCIC contract trappers, and boy, he and his partner Reg are really good at this. So they can nose them down, find them, and get images of them, bait them, get these corral pens set up, get them acclimated to those, and it doesn't take very long to acclimate to them. Draw the pigs in, and then of course the pigs are sent off to pigatory. There's a photo of Alan. Hello, Alan. Terrific collaborator. We also have escaped and uncontained pigs that can be problematic, and this was a site near Holdfast last November, I think, or last October, of a large number of escaped pigs or uncontained pigs that were causing problems for this fellow's neighbor. And obviously, given what we know about potential escapes and establishments of populations, this can be problematic. So we're asking that people don't do this. I mentioned before the corral trap, and I'll talk about this in a little bit of detail with the photos that we have. You can see here that this is about 20 feet across, and it's a circular mesh trap staked into the ground with T-bar posts. The next photo will illustrate this a little bit better, but there is maybe I'll just forward to that. You'll have an entrance associated with it, and these are manufactured by a company called Jaeger. And what this is, it's a gate that is triggered by a cell phone cam. So the cell phone cam will alert the trappers when there are pigs in the corral trap, and they can remotely trigger that gate to slam down. The pigs are initially alarmed. They'll scoot around for a little while, and then they'll settle down really quite quickly and go back to munching on the bait. These fellows will return later and send the pigs off to their final resting place. So there have been some adventures in mobility and adventures in temperature. Streety tires and snowdrifts don't mix very well, and we've had some curious applications of quad racks, moving some of our hog feeders around. Of course, snowmobiles is the better way to go about things at this time of year. So this is the map from last year. This is August 2020 to August 21. And you can see in that St. Preux area, we do have a high concentration of animals. We have had some reports as well, one from the Lloydminster area, and these were what are called quote unquote white pigs, so primarily domestic lineage, and were removed. We also had a report near Prince Albert, and though that population is still being chased, so we haven't really pinned that one down yet. We did have some escaped domestic pigs that were brought back home, and for the most part, control was very effective. So of the 175 pigs that were detected, 93 were removed. And as I indicated before, we have some that were still chasing around. We also have one near Balgony that I'm going to be heading out in the next week or so to get some camera traps. But this sounds like a solo boar. We had a solo boar report near Wolseley as well, and I had cameras up for 6 weeks and could not locate this animal. So I suspect he was transient. So ongoing, we got camera traps. We're analyzing the camera data, as I mentioned before, tens of thousands of pictures, making Brett's eyes go all googly. Also, as I mentioned before, adjuster and working group investigations of reports. We're also contributing to a number of different working groups, including the provincial working group. We also have membership, or I sit on the Canadian Invasive Wild Pig Initiative, or the Canadian Invasive Wild Pig Operational Group specifically, and the management subgroup. I also sit on the Canadian Invasive Wild Pig Strategy Working Group that is developing a national strategy for dealing with feral pigs or invasive wild pigs. And this work has now produced a draft strategy that will be going out for comment to stakeholders, hopefully very soon. Also contribute to the Western Invasive Species Council Feral Swine Transboundary Working Group, or the Transboundary Group, as the membership calls it. So this is a collection of representation from Western Canada and the Northern States, and both governments. We have some academic representation on this, but primarily government and collaborating on best practices and strategies for controlling feral pigs in this part of the world. There are also several African swine fever working groups that we contribute what information we have to them. Of course, the SEIC efforts, and my hat really goes off to the trappers in the St. Brew area, as I indicated before. These guys they are a wild pig's worst nightmare. The Ministry of Environment is currently recording incidental pigs as part of other vertebrate surveys, most recently as part of their moose aerial survey, and I applaud them for that. Ministry of Environment, of course, have been excellent collaborators on this project. We're going to continue with further monitoring of sites with historical reports. We also get social media reports on occasion, so I think the term mining is a little strong at this point. We do what we can with the time we have to look at social media reports of feral pig activity or animals being killed as part of hunts, and try to establish those locations. We got some extension efforts like what we're seeing today, and we've done some monitoring in provincial, and are in discussion with Prince Albert National Park as well. We're also looking at some regulatory changes as well, and we've begun work towards introducing feral pigs as regulated pests in the province. This is a work in progress, so we're far from being making a final announcement about that. I also indicated that we're looking at a provincial feral pig strategy, and again, I thank SEIC and the Ministry of Environment for their comments on that. And we have submissions with, or a submission with the Pest Management Regulatory Agency of Health Canada for a control product for feral pigs. And we're hoping to hear about that by the end of this month, early next month. So a lot of work ongoing from the ministry and ministries and our collaborators to try to control these animals in Saskatchewan. Hunting. I think we probably need to talk about this because we do get a little bit of pushback on this. We're dissuading hunting. Reason being is that they are smart animals and they can shift their behavior on a dime. So hunting tends to scatter the sounders and it makes them much more difficult to locate. And if you can't locate them, you can't control them. What we're hoping to avoid is what they've seen in the southeast United States, where the pig hunting industry has become deeply entrenched and culturally important, and we're hoping to avoid that in Saskatchewan. Because of this entrenchment of this culture and this industry, it's going to be very difficult to reduce populations and near impossible to eradicate them in that part of the world. Some changes to the Saskatchewan Hunters and Trappers Guide have been made in the most recent edition, indicating that or asking people to report rather than shoot animals, so that we can go and remove them in a systematic way and get the whole sounder rather than scattering the animals around. I mentioned before that establishing an outfitting industry and the cultural importance in the southern U.S. Has been highly problematic for people trying to control their populations down there and limit the potential impact of African swine fever on their domestic pork production. So really what this is about is preserving a very important industry, both in the United States and Canada, as well as the pretty significant environmental impacts that these animals can have. So if you see a wild boar or you see a feral pig, please report it. There are a couple of reporting hotlines. One is maintained by Saskport. That is the 833 pig spot, and you've probably seen the billboards for the SCIC reporting line. If you can't remember what it was, the Ag Knowledge Center as well will take reports. We will happily entertain photos of tracks. I mean, if you've got a time-stamped photo here, and just to be able to tell the difference between a pig track and a deer track, and you can see one up at the top there under, let's say, less than ideal conditions. They're pretty characteristic. I mean, you can see, the display of that dew claw, or the dew claws, is pretty characteristic and not what you would see with a deer. But questions we do get all the time is, how to tell the tracks. And with that, I'm going to put this QR code up. So this allows people to sign up for our pest monitoring programs, including wild pigs or feral pigs. So if you don't mind, just point your camera at that. A drop-down menu will appear, and you can just fill in your information. Or if you're an agronomist and working with a grower, please forward that to them. We need permission to access these sites, and this is a great way to expedite that. And with that, I will take any questions you have.
Thanks, James. Question time. Okay, we got one question here. I'm curious to know if the caught wild boar's meat is donated or just destroyed.
Most of the meat that's we'll say captured in the St. Brew area is butchered, so it's going to food. There, I should probably qualify that though, is there is some indication of high parasite loads, not in the Saskatchewan pigs, but as indicated, they do harbor a number of diseases. So special consideration for butchering needs to be taken. These aren't your typical, domestic clean animals. So heavy parasite loads in some United States jurisdictions and problems with the meat there, and you can see there are some diseases with the Canadian populations.
Okay, one more question. What type of biosecurity is used for African swine fever?
It varies by jurisdiction. I mean, for the most part, happily, we don't have it here, but it's going to be detection and isolation primarily. So much like you would see with any potentially worker vectored animal health issue.
Thanks, James.
So,
yeah. Is there any app to report, like Is there any app to report?
Oh, it's funny you say. So I have actually developed a Survey 123 app that I think is a pretty good one. So this one is nearly ready for public release. We've had beta testing with our group, and it seems to work pretty well. And what this will let you do is it's a smartphone application. It'll let you report a feral pig. It automatically geolocates it. You'll have to enter your contact information so that we can contact you later on. But there is obviously privacy concerns with submission of personal data, and we're very careful with that. When a reporter reports, they are the only person who can see their data, unless it's the administrator, and I would be the administrator of that app, so I'm the only other person who would see it. So we have your contact information for follow-up. It also allows you to submit photos.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, hopefully that'll be ready for public distribution. Well, very soon. Yeah, it's been in development for some time now, and it's so close.
So one more question. What province in Canada has the largest population of wild boar?
That's tricky. That is honestly really tricky. By current accounts, published accounts, it seems the estimate is probably Saskatchewan and probably in the St. Brew region. But we have some indication that there is a significant population in Manitoba as well. And Alberta also has populations primarily in the Marithorpe area, and some to their southwest. But yeah, it seems, Western Canadian populations seem to be the concentration of these. You can see that Ontario has had a population that was removed from there. It seems their populations are quite limited, and for the most part are not established in breeding. But yeah, I think most estimates would place things, in the western provinces, certainly, with probably in that St. Brew area being a regional hotspot.
So with that, one more. What is the reason the population is like highest northeast of Saskatchewan?
Yeah. So that's that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still a relatively small swath of the Northeast where the animals are concentrated. And as I indicated before, the SCI trappers are doing an excellent job at reducing that population. So
Okay. One more. What are some barriers you see for feral pigs becoming a regulated pest?
um, I'm hoping to not see any. I think maybe potential pushback from hunter stakeholders, but I don't see major pushback from that, given the potential problem associated with them. I think having them as regulated pests really allows us to act quickly, and one of the big components that we're proposing is an obligation to report. So if you see a pig, you would be obliged to report it, and that would really go a long way to help us control these animals. But yeah, in short, I don't see major stumbling blocks to that. So
Okay. Let's see if there's any more questions. Okay. See someone hands up. No hands ups. Okay. So I think I didn't see any more questions. I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you, James, for the informative webinar. It was very informative and very good presentation. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, and have a good rest of the day.
thanks, Betty.
Thank you.